Yeah, oh my god, it sounds so real! Or she'd simply buggered off to the toilet, or they didn't see the total stranger again because they were standing behind other people in the dark. Yes. Alex and I didn't need to come back another day to figure this one out. A tour group of 15, and at least half of them were total strangers to each other, and you're saying that you think you see a stranger in the dark at one moment, and then you don't recognize her amongst the group again. Say it ain't so! What is perhaps more interesting is why you would take note of a total stranger in a large group of people in the first place, to even notice their absence a few minutes later. Perhaps if you were an excitable believer in the afterlife, front-loaded with the story of the disappearing girl, perhaps. Yes, maybe that's it, David. Maybe. And by maybe, I mean obviously. Or maybe it is ghosts. Or maybe you just thought she was really hot and wanted to ogle on her later again. Either way, she probably wasn't a ghost. A third possibility is the staff actually join tour groups as so-called ghosts periodically, and then slip away to freak people out, but I didn't detect anything that elaborate at the time. I don't think they would do that, because it kind of, then it's like, if they get caught doing that, and it's like, hey, you're not in this group, you're a tour guide, I've been here, but then it's like busted, and it's like, oh, okay. So they're faking the ghosts, whereas if they just use like psychological tricks and stuff, then there's like plausible deniability. It's like, they're not the ones making up ghosts, it's people's imaginations making up ghosts. Or maybe it's ghosts! The acid showers and Shadow Man. From there, the guide led us up a few more yards to the building that housed the mass showers. It was here that new arrivals had to strip down naked, hop onto one of these cold steel showers, and scrub themselves thoroughly to get rid of any parasites or surface-level infections that they might be carrying on their persons. But after your shower, you didn't exactly dry yourself off. Instead, the water mixed with carbolic acid sat on your skin. Oh my god. I'm assuming it's not particularly strong carbolic acid. I'm not even sure what carbolic acid is, but that still doesn't sound awesome. Over the course of the next few days, you would turn red, itchy, and the top two layers of your skin would gradually peel off. It was like being sunburned all over, including on your scalp and genitalia. Oh my god. There's a big difference between scalp and genitalia. Number of times I've been burned on my scalp. Well, look, I'm a very, very bald man. The answer is many, and I pretty much always wear a hat now. Burns on my genitalia? Never. And never want to. Like, I can't imagine having a sunburned penis. That sounds horrible. I will admit that the shower building looked like something out of a horror film. Chipped, early 20th century tiles you'd see in a creepy, derelict, insane asylum. Walls made of rusted, corrugated iron on each shower, and rows of them. Dozens, stretching on and on into the darkness of the building, lit only by the small windows at each end and the flashlights of the tour group. Yeah, there is something spooky, like inherently spooky about like derelict showers, right? It's just like, I don't know, it's just creepy. I think maybe it's because, you know, we're vulnerable in the shower. Like, there's lots of murder scenes in movies, like famously Psycho, and all of this stuff that happen like when people are in showers, because it's like you're naked, you're slippery, there's no weapons nearby. It's like, oh yeah, no, you're screwed. You're going to try grabbing onto a knife and it just slips out of your hands while you're getting stabbed by a murderer. Yeah, that's probably why, isn't it? That's why showers are creepy, because it's where we're vulnerable. Like in prison. The building was too long for a single flashlight to light it from end to end. Cavernous shadows yawned onward into oblivion between the rows of acid showers. It was genuinely creepy and reminded me of something you'd see in a concentration camp. Perhaps it was the fact newly arrived travellers were tamely led here to have their skin burned off. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it was in this location that the tour group really started to get jumpy. While filming the shower, someone's camera turned off suddenly while the phone was still on full battery. I guess a ghost was a bit shy of being filmed in the nude. A few people reported feeling a sudden coldness wash over them, as if a spirit had just passed by, yet another person reported having a metallic taste in their mouth, which the guide speculated was consistent with a taste of blood. Yeah, it's like if I got a metallic taste in my mouth, I'm like, well, I know what blood tastes like. I've tasted blood many times. Not because I'm a weirdo, but it's like, oh, I cut myself. You know, you just lick that blood up. Which is a weird thing to do, isn't it? I can't be the only one who does that. Or when you bite your mouth really badly and it bleeds, you're like, I know what blood tastes like. I'm extremely familiar with the taste of human blood. No, that's the only time you could say that sentence. Yeah, and then you're like, well, it's not that. And it's just in your mind. It's definitely in your mind. And if you're constantly tasting weird things that you're not tasting, go get a scan. Go see the doctor. It could be a brain tumour or something. I think I saw that on a TV show. When Alex and I returned to the showers during the daytime a few weeks later during Phase 2, we discreetly took a few swab samples of dust when the historical guide wasn't looking. A simple chemical test revealed that within the dust there was plenty of iron and rust particles, most likely chipped off from the decaying shower stalls that lined the entire building. Well, guys, you are like going above and beyond on your little research adventure. Yeah, I was just like, oh, the metallic taste, it's in the mines. It's in the mines. But no, little iron particles in the air. That sounds dangerous. I'm not going there. It's like iron particles. It sounds like, it's going to cause that asbestos disease. Such dust could easily be agitated and swirled into the air by people walking around the showers, and could easily have been inhaled or ingested by a person who would then report a metallic taste. But it wasn't blood. If anything, it pointed to how the air in the building was mildly unhealthy because of the particles in it. But one can inhale worse chemicals when wandering through an old building, and it's unlikely it did the bloke on the tour any lasting harm. Yeah, like asbestos. That mesothelioma disease is crazy. It's like, there was an episode of House about it, and a friend of mine's dad actually died of it, and it's just, you go to the doctor and you're like, oh yeah, I've got a bit of a cough, and like, yeah, you'll be dead in a year. It's like, oh my god, that is so intense, because it's just, that's it, people don't survive it for like very long at all. And it's like, I don't know, it's obviously not 100% fatal or whatever, but it's like a tumour around your lungs, in the lining of your lungs, from getting asbestos particles in there when you were a kid or like younger. And I'm like, that's intense. And I'm like, I hope I haven't been around any asbestos. I think I'm a bit young for it, to be honest, but really intense disease. You don't want that. Also, during Phase 2, we took a portable thermometer to I'm like, is that thermometer? Can you even read, fact boy? To investigate the flashes of cold that were frequently reported in the building. It was 24 degrees Celsius outside that day, or 75.2 degrees Fahrenheit, and within the building the temperature varied between 21 and 18 degrees Celsius, or 69.8 to 64.4 degrees Fahrenheit. The construction of the building should be noted. There was very little opportunity for sunlight to enter the building during the day. The building itself was not built to retain heat, like many buildings in Australia. Wait, why would buildings be built to retain heat in Australia? That sounds like a terror. Isn't Australia super hot? Be like, I want a building that gets rid of heat. I want terrible insulation. Although I guess you insulate like air conditioning inside as well, right? So I guess okay. I'm getting it. I'm just a bit dumb. Okay, I'm just not the smartest man around. So when it was in use, the showers did not become a sauna on really hot subtropical days. The building was old, not meant for living in even at the time of operation, and thus had worse drafts than even the boiler room restaurant. But it was the rows and rows of little metal cloisters, each with a drain pipe through which a blast of cold air could rush upward, that caused the most discrepancies in the building. So it is indeed likely that it wasn't just the night or people's paranoia. They were quite likely experiencing sudden slight drops in temperature as they walked around. It just wasn't from ghosts. As for the camera, suddenly turning off without being able to look at that smartphone specifically to see what its screensaver and lock screen settings were, or whether there was a malfunctioning battery, or to see how incompetent the person using it was operating a smartphone, we'll just have to chalk that up to user error on the part of the living, or just the phone being a bit weird. It's technology, it crashes all the time. Actually, phones are fairly reliable. I find my phone doesn't crash very often. In fact, it just seems to crash way less often than it used to in the past. But look, technology's not perfect. And yeah, it was that. Because you know what? There's lots of technology repair places, technical support. There's very little, ghost support. Like, oh yeah, my phone stopped working because of ghosts. The alternate explanation is a ghost could somehow operate a piece of 21st century technology better than that bloke could. And if that's the best evidence we have for ghosts, I think both Alex and I can live with that. Yes, me too. It is one of those cases of confirmation bias. If your electronic equipment messes up during a ghost hunt, then it must be spooks responsible for it through the electromagnetic spectrum. Yet if your computer were to crash or your TV were to suddenly lose power in normal life, it's unlikely you would blame it on ghosts. Electronic things mess up all the time. Thank you. Yes, 100% agree. And 100% of the time, there is a mechanical explanation for it. It's only when it happens in a dark room with Scooby-Doo vibes that it sends us into hysterics. Next time I'm just like working, using Adobe Premiere or something and it crashes, I'll be like, nah, not the ghosts again. God damn it. It was at this point the ghosts themselves began to appear. This took a turn. And that's when I started to believe in ghosts. Not really, David didn't write that. The tour guide told us about a girl who can sometimes be heard crying in one of the shower stalls. Unsurprisingly, a few minutes later, a woman on the tour said she could faintly hear the sound of a girl crying. To this, Alex merely whispered into a nearby shower stall that the ghost should pull herself together and shouldn't hang around the showers all day, but should get her fat weeping ass into her swimmers and get to suntanning on the beach. Savage Alex. As an afterthought, she added that today people pay hundreds of dollars to come here and do that and to stop being such a mopey idiot. The ghost did not respond. Shocking. The tour guide then told us about Shadow Man, a 7-foot-tall spectre that only appeared as a black phantasm. Phantasm? I don't know. I don't care. I'm not going to look up this word because, let's be fair, I don't look up that many words anyway, and also it's a made-up phantom word. I mean, all words are made up, but this one particularly so. And it was, at times, quite malevolent. Ghost hunters had previously talked to the ghost via a spirit box, and had determined that Shadow Man was an ugly ghost, disfigured by smallpox, and that is why he never shows his true form. Shortly after hearing this story, a girl screamed quite loudly and said that she'd seen Shadow Man lurking around one of the showers. Not missing a beat, Alex said, "Well, let's go find the bastard." And she swiftly charged off in the direction that the spectre had been reported in. A few people from the ghost tour merrily followed us, while the more timid and impressionable folks remained behind near the exit. They'd be like, yeah, I'll go over there. Oh no, the ghosty smallpox guy, what's he going to do? Gimme smallpox, he's a ghost, and he's not real. Also, Shadow Man was nowhere to be found. It should be mentioned at this point that some ghost enthusiasts will say that if you don't believe in ghosts or are otherwise spiritually closed off, like Alex and I almost certainly were, that the ghosts will not appear to you. I hope most of us can agree that this is some Santa Claus level b*** right here. Conveniently, the only sort of person who sees ghosts is either someone who believes in ghosts or is easily startled in dark, foreboding places. And on what information are people basing this claim? Wishful thinking? And if that was the case, if homeowners want to avoid the nuisance of living in haunted houses, all they have to do is stop believing in ghosts and they'll stop appearing to them. What circular nonsense it is. Indeed, I saw an amazing picture. It was a real picture. I don't think it was a joke of a house being sold somewhere in America, like somewhere, I don't know, maybe like Salem or shit like that. And there was the sign, it said, you know, they hang out and it says like for sale. And then underneath, there was another sign attached to it that said not haunted. It's like, oh my God. I'd like to buy a house in that town because I'd just buy the haunted ones. I'd just be like, yeah, this is haunted, right? I'm going to need like at least 20% off because of the haunting thing. And they'll be like, oof. Yeah, I guess we can do that because it's haunted. And I'll be like, amazing. And then I'll move in, and obviously there won't be any ghosts in there because they're not real. Alex and I took note of how the lines of showers could potentially refract and restrict light through the building. Indeed, during the night, you could easily see without the aid of a flashlight, just from the dim lighting from the windows. It wasn't pitch black, and there was a moderate amount of visibility to walk around without tripping over stuff. Otherwise, with all those hard corners and tiles that have a massive lawsuit on their hands. This all changed when you turned on a flashlight. Suddenly, you had clear visibility immediately in front of you, and darkness lay beyond. In the pictures of Shadow Man posted online, the light of a flashlight ends and the yawning chasm of darkness begins, just as you would expect to in any shadow. It just so happens that these shadows can take on a vaguely anthropomorphic shape. Again, if you've just been front-loaded with a story about Shadow Man, conveniently the same height as the showers, roughly speaking, it is hardly surprising you would imagine seeing something sinister. Yeah, this is one of those things, it's like, you know, why are we so good at... Humans are amazing at spotting patterns. Like, you look at the clouds, it's like, this looks like a that, this looks like a this. And it's like, obviously it doesn't. You know, they're not really this item. But it is crazy how easy it is for us to, like, spot things in random patterns. And that is exactly what's going on here. A merry jaunt to the morgue. From the acid showers, we had quite a hike to our next ghostly location. Alex swore loudly at her uncomfortable shoes, stopped, furiously kicked them off, and pulled on a pair of thongs from her purse. Yeah, the Australians and their thongs. Alex is not changing her underwear. That's what. Is this just a British thing? But a thong is underwear in women's underwear in British English at least. But the Australians, that's flip flops, mate, or plastic pool sandals for those not from Australia. The national footwear of our country. Is that actually like a thing, or is that like Foster's is the national beer of Australia, or are you all actually walking around in flip flops? The flip flops are stupid. I'm sorry, Australians, they're a bit stupid, because They're like sandals, except they don't have the thing on the back, so every step you take, you're like constantly like gripping your toes to keep the shoes like, and you know they make that slapping sound because you're using your toes to keep them on your feet. It's like, why not just have the back thing? Why not just have a pair of sandals? Or why not just wear shoes? I remember I was reading a style blog once, and something really stuck with me. They were like, the only place that is acceptable to wear sandals or flip-flops is when you're literally on the beach. Any other time, wear something else. And from that, so I always have a pair of boat shoes that I typically wear like in hot climates and stuff like that, you know, without the socks on the inside. They're comfortable. Are they called boat shoes? I don't know what they're called. Like the shoes you'd wear on a boat. They're great. And they're not sandals. I should probably just be okay with wearing sandals because I don't care that much about style. We trudged along a forested path. The tour guide continued to regale us with interesting facts. The first was that the grounds in which the quarantine station were built belonged to the Cadagal Aboriginal people of Australia, who had used this as a site of health and wellness prior to European contact. This made me reflect about where all the Aboriginal ghosts were. These people had first come to northern Australia roughly 60,000 years ago and had been in New South Wales for approximately 40,000 years or more, as long as humans had been in Europe. In 1791, 3 years after Europeans arrived in the Manly North Head area, a smallpox epidemic wiped out an estimated 90% of the Cadagal people because they had no biological resistance to European diseases. It seems to me that there should have been thousands of years' worth of very angry Aboriginal ghosts roaming around, not just some European settlers who rocked up in the last 2 centuries, yeah. I mean, of course, but that's way too logical, and thinking about it way too much and too sensibly, aren't we? Because those Aboriginal, like the others, they're like, oh, what happens? Well, you died of a disease while you were going somewhere on a boat with other people with diseases. You know there was the risks. Where the Aboriginal people are like, what the fuck, guys? What the f***? Why? Why? Greedy bastards. The guide then gave us an account of the twins, whom a colleague of his had seen on multiple occasions. These two eerie apparitions were 7 to 10 feet tall, but were composed of shimmering, silvery light. They nevertheless resembled very clear silhouettes of humans, with the outlines of their rib cages somewhat unnervingly moving back and forth, in and out of their bodies like pendulums, as they stood and stared at you. Oh my god, that is fairly creepy. Who came up with this? I mean, obviously they didn't really see a ghost, so who's like, yeah, the ghosts. What do they look like? Well, you know, the first person who obviously made it up is like, their rib cages came out of their body. I'd be like, dude, you need to write some Stephen King stuff, because that is an imagination. I'll be like, well, they were wearing a sheet, they had red eyes. That's all, you know, that's it. Not their rib cages came out and back into their body. That is some nightmare shit, my dude. One theory went that the twins were actually just one person, the abnormally tall Dr. Reed, who was once a doctor at the station. Or maybe this particular tour guide in question was just a little pissed up and seeing double when he ran into the good doctor. A similar story came from yet another colleague of our guides. This colleague was walking down a path near the mortuary called Paranormal Alley. Oh, what's that again, David? Is that front loading? Yes? In part of the station where supernatural energy is at its highest, when he saw two ghostly apparitions walking menacingly towards him. Also, filled with foreboding, he turned around to beat a retreat, and he saw 2 more ghosts behind him, also heading in his direction. He was trapped. The man sat on the ground, felt dizzy, an overpowering sense of doom, and he was violently sick. It was only when he managed to rally and leave the area that he began to feel better again. In both of these cases, which were testimonies of people who worked at the station, related to us secondhand by yet another staff member who was literally paid to creep us out, they are of dubious reliability, to say the least. Oh. I just found, this is completely and utterly irrelevant, I just changed my position and found a sticker stuck to my leg, which I've been walking around outside all day with that sticker stuck to my leg. From one of my kids. Brilliant. Thanks for the tangent fact, boy. Get back to it. So it could all just be nonsense. However, with some later research, I found out that numerous staff members swear up and down that they are true believers in ghosts, and evidently those same true believers are drawn to apply to work at the quarantine station in the first place. Yeah, although honestly, like, they do ghost tours here in Prague where you can, there's lots of tours you could do around the city, and they all have different themes, and one of them is like you can go to a ghost tour. I've never done it. But it's like, yo, if I needed a job and someone was like, Simon, you got to do the ghost tour, I'll be like, okay, I got no problem with this. Like, it's fake, but I can act, you know? We'll just be like, and then, during the night, blah, 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 blah. And people are like, oh my god, that's so scary. I know, right? Ghosts are so real, Michael. They are real. Absolutely. Sorry, I don't know who Michael is. Just made him up. I always like to give people names in my stories. Like a Disneyland for kooks. So, if the stories aren't outright lies, if you are regularly seeing shimmering silvery twins with moving rib cages, or just being bushwhacked by fast-moving spectres while walking on a forest path, these aren't just incidents where you get the creeps from a bit of darkness or a bit of cold that can easily be explained away. This is either a sign of a more serious mental illness for which you might need medication or therapy, or a hallucination brought on by a neurological condition. In fact, you may want to get yourself checked out by a doctor to make sure that you don't have brain cancer or chemical poisoning. Oh, it's like, this is the thing. If I started seeing ghosts, I wouldn't be like, oh my god, this is so cool, I can see ghosts. I'd be like, oh, I'm probably really sick. It's either, you know, I'm going to need, like, drugs from a psychiatrist, or I've got a brain disease. I mean, like, you know, like a brain cancer or something like that. It's either way, it's not good, or I'm being poisoned by something. Which probably means that my family's being poisoned as well, because, you know, we're in the same environment all the time. So that would be brilliant. That would be my reality if I saw ghosts. I'm being serious here. Profoundly realistic and bizarre visual hallucinations while you are awake might mean there's something very serious and life-threateningly wrong with your health. Get yourself checked. Be safe. Don't just say, ooh, ghosts! Tell your friends and go on with your day while a tumour that could significantly reduce your life expectancy might be growing inside your skull. Yes, go see a doctor. You get a brain scan. Be like, doctor, I am seeing that I know is not there. And they'll be like, get him to the MRI machine. There was a great... I've mentioned this on videos, not on this channel, but on other channels that I've done before, and I still haven't found it. And people have sent me so many things trying to identify this one thing that I just desperately want to find. It was on Reddit years ago, and it was this incredibly creepy letter that a tenant had written to her landlord, or his landlord, complaining about the upstairs neighbours, being like, they keep banging on, and it goes through the letter. It's like they keep banging on the floors, and I know they're watching me because they bang on the floor, so I hear it on the ceiling of the rooms that I'm in, and I'm pretty sure they've installed a camera somewhere, but I can't find it. Blah 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 blah, and it just gets like spine-chillingly creepy, like the creepiest you've ever read. And then the top comments on Reddit was like, or the not the title because that would have spoiled it, but like under the image, it was like a letter written by someone with schizophrenia. And you're like, I'm getting chills thinking about this right now. It was the craziest thing I've seen. Like, not being derogatory towards that person being crazy, but it's like a crazy thing to read. Like, it was mind-blowing just how that just feeling, because at first you're like, I'm reading that thing and I'm like, oh my god, those neighbours are who the hell does this? Why would you hate someone so much to do that to them? And then you get down and you're like, wait, something's not right here. And then you realise it's all just in their head. And it's like, whoa! God damn! I still remember this. If anyone knows that, put it in the comments below, because I guess if you're watching this video, if not, just hit me up on Twitter at Simon Whistler. Because, goddamn, I would love to find that. If I find it, I'll read it on a future episode, because it is just... I'm off on a massive tangent. Let's get back. Mr. Slimy. We arrived at the morgue. While standing outside, a man, aged in his 20s or 30s, started to have what I would describe as a panic attack. He said he couldn't head inside the morgue. There was just too much overwhelming negativity coming from the place. I once had a panic attack. It was really intense. I was quite young. I think I must have been in my late teens or early 20s. And I just smoked too much weed. And I was just hanging out, just like by myself. And I'm like, I just suddenly felt like not good. Like, oh my god, something's definitely wrong. And then you got in this spiral of like, something is wrong. And I'm like just trying to get a grip of myself. Like I shut myself in the bathroom, like what is going on? Am I having a heart attack? And then a few minutes later, I feel totally fine, and I've never had a panic attack again. And let's just say I've not smoked that much weed again. because it was not a good time. The tour guide, obviously familiar with this sort of episode, was comforting him and explaining and eventually convinced him that everything would be fine and to head inside. During the man's panic attack, Alex and I happened to be standing nearby, but we said nothing and merely observed. What was interesting about it was that the man said he didn't really believe in ghosts, but that the feeling had suddenly hit him. Either this meant that he wasn't telling the whole truth, or the creepy stories of the evening had taken a mental toll on him, which just goes to show how strong the power of suggestion can be on some people. Alex also wants me to mention that he could have been high or something, which might have made him more quick to internalize the creepy atmosphere and have a profound reaction to it. Oh boy, yes. Yeah, no. This is like all things that alter your mental state. Yeah, like I'm pretty sure I can't imagine myself having a panic attack unless there's a reason to be extremely panicked. Like then I'll be like, ah! I've never been in a situation where it's been like, oh my god, this is a disaster. I've always just been like, okay, let's logically deal with the problem. Like, even when shit's gone badly wrong, like in a moment, I'm usually like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Because that's just how my mind works. It's only when I've been chemically altered that it's been a problem. Sounds like this guy got super high and went on a ghost tour, which seems like, that I can imagine. I wouldn't get super high before going on the ghost tour. Indeed, the entire tour group had something of a party vibe, so I can't rule out that some pills were popped or spliffs were smoked by some people prior to the tour. Inside the morgue, there was a table, on top of which there was a mannequin from a 1980s shop window simulating the appearance of a corpse. We filed into the room and stood around the table with our backs against the wall. There was one gap where there was a large window and no pane of glass, which people would not stand in front of, so in order to make room, I stood in front of it. My own anxieties were about spiders or snakes coming through the window, or maybe a flying fox, a kind of giant bat rather than a ghost. I'd be like, David, why are you scared of spiders? You're an adult man. They'll be like, because David lives in Australia, where, like, my wife, whenever she sees a spider, she doesn't like spiders. She's always like, will you put it outside? And I never do, because I know if you put the spiders outside, they die, so I always just take it to another room and pretend to put it out the window. Hopefully my wife doesn't listen to this. And I'm like, why are you scared of spiders? She's like, I just don't like them. If we lived in Australia, she'd be like, because they could kill me. And I'd be like, legitimate fear. I also don't want to put this outside. As it turns out, in Phase 2 in the light of day, I discovered the giant window just opened into a second part of the morgue, also inside, so I needn't have worried. On top of the mannequin, the tour guide placed an EMF meter, a device the size of a TV remote used to detect abnormalities in electromagnetic fields. So if a disturbance was picked up, the green light on the EMF meter would turn red. Thus, according to paranormal investigators, a ghost was nearby. Unfortunately, scientific testing has shown that EMF meters can be set off by anything from a mobile phone to a computer mouse to power lines to car batteries to vibrating sexual aids. Who did that research? It's like, yeah, we're going to get this ghost meter and put it next to a dildo. It's like, okay, what's up? What research are you doing? The tour guide began to explain that cadavers were brought to the morgue for dissections, autopsies, and embalming once a disease killed them. As such, even today, the ghostly stench of rotting flesh could be smelled by witnesses standing in the morgue. I figure it was more likely a possum or a bandicoot had died in the bushes somewhere outside, or a nearby trash can was stinking in the Australian heat. The guide warned us of the local morgue poltergeist, a gentleman known only by the nickname of Mr. Slimy, who was nevertheless theorized to be a highly sexed mortician who used to hook up with nurses at night at his place of work. I'm not sure how many nurses would be fond of making out in a morgue, but whatever floats their boat. I'm not one to kink shame. The problem with Mr. Slimy, the guide explained, was that his libido did not abandon him at death. Numerous witnesses over the years claimed that Mr. Slimy had sexually assaulted them by groping their genitals, playing with their nipples, or kissing them on the mouth. Apparently, Mr. Slimy did not discriminate between men and women. Sounds like the tour guide's getting their hands. It's the ghosts! It's like, someone touched my bottom! It was the ghosts! Ah, yes. Apparently, Mr. Slimy did not discriminate between men and women. This was another interesting tactic to creep out the crowd in a whole new way and draw a particularly pronounced groan from some of the women there. No boyfriend or husband had the audacity, thankfully, of impersonating Mr. Slimy to scare their better half, but I bet it's been done over the years. Oh my god, yeah, absolutely. Just like, to my wife, just to be absolutely clear, be like, ah! Yeah, that would be amusing. But I'm a child, so maybe Mr. Slimy was the reason that they left a mannequin in there. Wait, what? People filled up. Am I missing something? Was he sexually assaulting mannequins? People filed out of the morgue. I was one of the last people to exit. Just me, Alex, and a couple of people standing around the table, talking quietly to the tour guide. As I strode forward from the wall and past the table on my way out, the EMF meter, which had previously been a placid green, started flashing an alarming red. The tour guide met my eyes and said, "He likes something about you." It was probably a phone, something like that. In order to break the tension and pass over this awkward moment with a light-hearted joke, I said rather loudly to the unseen spectre, "How about a blowjob?" David, you said you weren't going to ruin it for everyone. The ghost did not respond, and the guide, to my disappointment and shame, seemed slightly annoyed and upset. I felt I pushed my luck too far. It's kind of a move. But I like it. Just then, Alex decided to chime in and ask what a ghost... I am going to... Let's just... I'm going to get this video demonetized if we continue down this route, David. So, definitely can't read that. Definitely can't say that one. Okay, the postmaster and the matron. Yeah, because YouTube scans videos. If you're just listening, this is a podcast. It also goes out on YouTube. YouTube scans videos for words, and if they find words they don't like, they take away your money. And they restrict it to an audience of over a certain age, which is good. I mean, everyone listening to this is probably over the age, is an adult or teenager, I guess, anyway. So, 16 to 34, or 18 to 34 is my main audience, and then, around the edges of that, typically. What are we talking about? Oh, yeah. If I say some of the words that David and Alex talk about there, let's just say I'm not going to get paid for this video. And I like to get paid, This is my work. The tour continued uphill to the post office. Here was supposed to be an evil, malevolent spirit named the Postmaster. It is speculated the actual identity of the poltergeist is Superintendent James Forsyth Vincent, who ran the choir. That is a name and a half, isn't it? Forsyth Vincent. Sounds like anyone, double-barreled surnames. And I feel like, is this a difference? Because I think I've definitely made this joke before, and people are like, it's the opposite in America. If you've got a double-barreled surname in the UK, you're usually a bit posh. Whereas people in the US were like, if you got a double-barreled surname, it means you live in a trailer park in the US or something like that. And I was like, that's an interesting difference. He ran the quarantine station. Good. His wife died mysteriously of a morphine overdose. Less good. And he married a woman 24 years his junior 6 months later. Well, whether that's good or not, that is a matter of opinion. William Hay. So 6 months? Dude, you could have waited till she was cold, my man. What the f***? William Hay, a witness to the death, also allegedly killed by the postmaster. Hay is said to have committed suicide by shooting himself twice, first in the stomach and then in the head. People are going to be like, how do you shoot yourself twice? Well, one, because you shoot yourself in the stomach, you're like, oh, that's really painful. May as well shoot myself in the brain, because I'm just going to die. Getting shot in the stomach, isn't that famously a painful way to go?
You're going to be okay!
I don't know. An unusual method for suicide. The postmaster had him buried within 24 hours of his death. Wait. Is the postmaster murdering people he doesn't like his wife and this dude? And personally signed off on his autopsy. William Hay also became a vengeful ghost at quarantine station. Meanwhile, the ghost of the postmaster is said to be able to reduce people to spontaneous tears by sheer force of evil. Given how many reasons a person can have for bursting into tears, especially when impressionable and front-loaded by the ghost story, it's difficult to investigate the phenomenon without more time and a suitable group of crybaby test subjects. Alex nevertheless spent several minutes trying to provoke the ghost, calling the postmaster, and I quote, a small loser who was too stupid to know that getting a divorce was less scandalous than murdering your wife. Alex, you savage. The phantom did not appear and smite us down despite all of Alex's come-at-me bro taunts and insults. The only spontaneous crying that happened was from me laughing. We then moved toward the hospital section. The guide told us on the balcony that witnesses had detected an angry male energy there, most likely from a male doctor who used to work there. So, angry male energy sounds like incels. Nobody in the group detected anything. We moved inside the hospital wing to where there were 2 main rooms filled with hospital beds. In the first room, we were told that was a benevolent spirit, and we were asked if we felt a warm aura of kindness in the room. A few front-loaded people muttered agreement. In the second room, we were told it was inhabited by the matron, the ghost of a head nurse, and the most formidable entity in the quarantine station. We were asked if anyone noticed the energy of the second room was drastically more evil, led by the nose. Some people agreed. The matron could overpower you with negative energy if you represented even the slightest disorder to her tightly run hospital ward. At the back of the group, Alex immediately began rustling and messing up the sheets on one of the hospital beds. Nothing happened. Shocking. The only thing of note to occur was a girl laid down on one of the hospital beds while the guide talked. She later complained that she couldn't breathe properly, which the guide speculated because people had died of tuberculosis and Spanish influenza in those beds. Unless there were still traces of the disease on the bedsheet centuries later, I suspect it was most likely hyperventilation and an active imagination. I had also sat down on one of the beds and had noticed no such disturbance. Why are you sitting down on the beds? I mean, like, I'm on some ghost tour in some abandoned hospital with, like, sheets that are 100 years old and we, like, used for, like, plague victims. I'll be like, yeah, hard pass. I mean, I might be a little bit drunk, moving into a little bit hungover, but I'm just gonna lean against this wall. That sounds better. The Gravedigger's Cottage. Which brings us to the climax of the tour. The last stop, the so-called Gravedigger's Cottage, located between two grave sites. Despite the name, a gravedigger never actually lived there. Instead, the cottage was periodically inhabited by doctors who were said to have conducted sick and perverted experiments on women and children. One woman is said to have committed suicide in the bathtub at the back of the cottage, which is reputedly its most haunted room. Wait, I mean, like, the doctors doing experiments and like, yes, has absolutely happened in history. But did it really happen at a place where they were just quarantining people as they go into a country? It doesn't seem like, well, at some point they're going to be released. It's not like this is a death camp where they're just going to be murdered. It's like, well, people, there's a roster and a register and these people are just coming to Australia. It seems a little bit less likely than, you're having a death camp. The cottage itself is said to be inhabited by a powerful ghost named Sam. I feel like Sam is the least ghostly name. Oh yes, Sam the ghost. Alright. He sounds friendly. Of unverified origin or identity, the tour guides there all pay him a great deal of respect. Prior to entering the cottage, the guides always knock and ask Sam permission to enter. It's a great way to ramp up the tension. It's also a little bit cringe, isn't it? This whole thing's a little bit cringe, isn't it? Apparently Sam was okay letting people inside today, but I do wonder if for believability and consistency, guides sometimes pretended that Sam was angry and packed paying customers on their way before they could look around. Sounds like this is the last stop on the tour. It's like, yeah, what's the time, 10 o'clock? Seems Sam's angry today, and I want to catch the last bus home. Somehow I doubt it, but certainly it paid not to make Sam angry. A few years ago, a video went semi-viral in the Australian media when a German medium pretended to be pushed by Sam into an adjoining room. The woman then claimed to have received a bruise from Sam on her elbow. The footage, if you can find it, shows a rather portly woman looking at the camera to make sure that it was pointed at her, then comically flinging herself into another room out of sight of the camera. If Sam was truly responsible for this, I'm comforted to know that we share the same opinion of mediums. I think it is a little messed up that some people think it's okay to take money by lying about talking to grieving people's deceased relatives. Yeah, mediums are pieces of shit. Because it's fake. You're doing cold reading. You're just looking up on, psychological hints that people are giving away, and then you're manipulating them into thinking that you're talking to their dead relatives. It's fake. It's fake. Because you're faking it. So you're kind of just a fraud, aren't you? Kind of feels like it should be illegal, doesn't it? Because it's exploitative. And it makes you a piece of shit. Numerous phenomena have been noted at the Gravedigger's Cottage. Voices, moving furniture, randomly opening cabinets or cabinets that refuse to open, sounds of crying, screams, strange lights being emitted from the windows late at night when nobody's there. The tour guide sent us inside, gave us a little tour, and told us we were going to wait outside because the energy of the building was just too overwhelming. Later, with research, I found that all tour guides are instructed to do this, a perfect tactic. Not only is it too much for our guide, but we are left alone in the darkness to wander an extremely haunted location with a ghost that might harm us. If ghosts were real, this would be a legal minefield.
No.
Yes. Alex and I immediately set about our business, Alex seemed to be thoroughly absorbed by uttering obscenities at ghosts, so I didn't interrupt her. Meanwhile, I quickly looked inside multiple cabinets to see what was inside. At one point, I found myself reflecting that it was actually quite a nice traditional Australian cabin, and I told Alex I would love to have one like this at the edge of the woods. Alex snorted and said, "This place is a shithole." David, are you smoking crack? David, this place is a dump. You want to live here, David? Get some taste. Looking at the old furniture, rotary dial phone, and rickety brass-framed beds, I admitted that it certainly would be creepy to sleep all night in this place alone, at least not without a couple of lights and a nice show on the telly. May I recommend streaming a nice relaxing podcast by Simon Westside? Yes. Although don't stream my Casual Criminalist podcast where you're staying alone in a cabin in the woods. Or scare the shit out of you, and you will become convinced that you're going to be on the podcast in the future. I was going to say if you're feeling that right now, then but this isn't the Casual Criminalist podcast. That is another podcast I do, which you should absolutely subscribe to as well. Because I would say that, wouldn't I? If you don't, my ghost is going to come and haunt you. Alex and I then head into the bathroom, which was indeed a bit run down. We walked up to the bathtub and stared inside its empty contents. We did not see the spectre of a woman who killed herself. Nevertheless, Alex said, "Get out of there, lady." Wait, sorry. Get out of there, lady. Australian. This is an Australian accent. It's a terrible one. I'm not. Shall I try it? I'm going to try it. Get out of there, lady. You get all pruny. Come back with us. We'll have a drink. God, I'm so terrible at accents. I really need to work on that, or just not do them. Let's just not do them. That's an easier task. There was no reply. Meanwhile, the girlfriends and boyfriends had followed us into the bathroom. The girl said, "It's so creepy in here, mate." I just added the mate to make it sound more Australian. Oh, they're tourists, though. They could be just from somewhere else. And turned around the door to the door to leave again. She then let out a massive blood-curdling scream directly in front of her. She watched the cabinet open, seemingly on its own. Her boyfriend gripped her in his arms. They both seemed rooted to the spot. I, meanwhile, in a flash, knew what had happened. When I'd looked through the same cabinet a few minutes earlier, I'd struggled with the latch at the top that held both doors shut. It was an old-fashioned latch, and it was dark, and I was admittedly still slightly drunk. Yes, he had many bottles of wine. So the thing had merely come free and scared the life out of this poor girl in the dark. I quickly moved past the couple, marched to the cabinet, and slammed the doors shut.
No, I'm not doing that.
I then turned to the girl and said, "It's going to be all right. Nothing to worry about here." The tour guide, meanwhile, came in, inquired what had happened, and took a few minutes calming the girl down on the porch. Shortly thereafter, we all piled into a shuttle and, previously ignored, I got a number of backslaps and compliments on my bravery. As if I had swaggered up and done something heroic instead of simply closing a cabinet. I was mucked up the first time, all of which Alex thought was hilarious. I'd be like, "Nah, you're right." I'd just be like, "Yeah, I'm a hero. Absolutely a hero. Buy me a beer." But at least we had given other members of the tour group their money's worth without spoiling their fun. I didn't mention the cause of this paranormal activity to anyone. It just seemed like telling a child that the tooth fairy wasn't real. Ah, David. Decoding the unknown is basically, it could be called telling children the tooth fairy is not real, couldn't it? Monkeys and shoes.
What?
The tooth fairy really strikes to the core of things. When we are children, the ghosts and goblins we fear in the dark seem all too real, to an extreme degree. I remember being deathly fearful for years as a young lad of an oddly shaped chest of drawers in my bedroom. I had nightmares about this chest of drawers coming to life and dragging me into the basement where the furnace would eat me. God damn, David. No wonder you're a writer. Your imagination is extremely active. I was just like, it's a weird looking chest of drawers. That's a furnace. He's a very boring child. Even at a young age, we draw conclusions about natural phenomena, but our young minds often draw the wrong conclusions. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We are evolved to find patterns in things, and this in turn helps us to invent, to adapt, and to survive. It is a power that makes us extremely successful as a species, and has taken us from stone tools to skyscrapers in just a few thousand years. But occasionally, the wires get crossed. We see patterns that aren't really there, or we don't see the full picture. The wheels and gears behind the illusion. 3,000 years ago, thunder and lightning might be seen as the rage of an angry god. Less than 300 years ago, the death of some livestock might seem like the work of devil-worshipping witches, and the bumps we hear in the night might be attributed to ghosts. When all it ever is our powerful human imaginations running rampant and our instinct toward pattern-seeking working overtime with limited information or misinformation. We must recognize the sensibility that we are just apes, intellectually the same as we were 100,000 years ago, just with more knowledge and more stuff. Or to put it more glibly, we're just monkeys in shoes. As for Alex and I, we recovered from our hangovers the next day. We decided not to write a paper. We did, however, go back to enact Phase 2 and came to some pretty solid empirical conclusions about our experience. We mused that it was a unique idea for a TV show for two skeptics to wander around haunted houses drunk, taking with ghosts and urban myths, then returning the next day to investigate the paranormal activity we proposed. So, if anyone steals this idea, you owe us royalties. Anyway, my fellow apes, sweet dreams, and sleep tight. Thank you, David. This was very enjoyable. I hope who are you out there listening, you enjoyed this. I don't know. This show is just an excuse for me to read interesting stuff. But people watch it, which I love, or they listen to it as a podcast. If you are watching this